Welcome to another episode of Cowbells and Conversations. My name is Allison Clark, and I am so excited to have my guest with me today because during the holidays, we need to be more aware that the holidays sometimes aren't as fun, and we need to be more kind and also get some tools on how to deal with grief. And so I have my friend who is truly the grief expert. I've known Georgena for years through the National Speakers Association, and I'm so happy that you can be on the show today to really give us some tools on how we can have a better holiday season. So please introduce yourself, and then also just let us know how did you get into this work, and then also we're going to go into some deeper conversations.
Good morning, Allison. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Georgena Eggleston, and I am the grief guide. I was called to this work because we had 5 people in our family die in 3.5 years.
Oh.
My brother Mark died by suicide. It was a voluntary suicide in June of '94, and later that month, my father-in-law died of an illness that had been a long illness. So we had the sudden death of Mark's death, and we had the anticipatory grief of Clarence's death. And then mother died of a brain tumor in June of '97, and my dad dropped dead of a heart attack in December that same year. They'd been married 51 years.
Oh my gosh.
So there were many different kinds of grief that I experienced, but the grief that really brought me to my knees was the impulsive suicide of my son Reed then in January of 1998. So it was just a devastating experience. And it's very interesting, Allison, because in our culture, there are very few tools and tips for grief out there that you want to latch onto and be prepared. But when grief comes, you look all over for tools.
Oh, I'm sure.
So that's how I came to this work. And it was really unique because at the time, I was a speech language pathologist, and I set the intention for myself to become a better listener. Because I realized in all those years of working with clients, I'd never had a course in how to listen. And so a friend of mine recommended a training by Alana Rubenfeld. And this was in January, the first part of January in 1998. Well, that turned out to be not only training to become a body-mind therapist, but it was my own healing from grief.
Right. And so when you went through that, I mean, you had so much that you had to process.
Yes.
What was your major, I mean, how did you move on? I mean, that is so much hurt, and change in your life. So how did that help you?
Well, what that process did was it allowed me to get out of my mean mind, back down into my shattered heart, but it was through the bridge of the body. So I began to be aware of the aches and pains in my body that always point to an emotion. Now in raw grief, the emotions just come.
Everywhere.
Yes. You know that. But as grief progresses and we're in that fragile state where we look better, but we're really just barely holding ourselves together.
Inside, yes.
Yep, we can begin to really deeply listen to our body and our emotions, and there's guidance in there in the metaphors. So I learned a new language. It was a very freeing experience because the grief would come up, but then after I had really related to the grief and it was released, there would be an image or there would be a new guidance that would come through. So it was a layering process.
Wow. And then, so based on your own personal work, you have started to, I mean, you've been helping people for years.
I have.
So as you're helping people, what are some, I mean, how do you coach them? And, so many people, I was telling you that we need to be more aware during the holidays. I was talking to a
Yes.
client last week and I said, hey, what are your Thanksgiving plans? And thinking they were going to be fun. Well, this was her Thanksgiving. That was the first time that her father-in-law, he had died earlier this year. And this would be the first Thanksgiving without him. So the holidays aren't necessarily like exciting and fun for everyone, because it is definitely going to be, for so many people, the first holiday without someone, that meant a lot to them, or even if, they haven't been with them for years, it's still sad. So what advice could you give us first off to be just a little bit more aware and kind? And then also I'd love to hear just some of your coaching tips overall. That's kind of a broad category of grief,
Sure.
but the holiday, I just think we need to be more aware. Like, that just made me think like, okay, Thanksgiving and holidays and Hanukkah, whatever you're celebrating, aren't necessarily like, hey, are you so excited? Like, we need to be a little bit more in tune with what's going on with people. So what's your advice with that?
I would say take your cue from the season, because right now we're in the season where the days are getting shorter and the time of darkness is greater.
Oh, yes.
So this is an opportunity for us to be more still, to be more grounded. And so when you meet someone, instead of coming like this, simply come from that place of heart and presence.
I love it.
Because when we come from that place, we're not going high, we're not going, it's just that I'm meeting you. I'm really listening to you. And I feel that what grief does is grief calls us to slow down and listen. So when we meet someone that is grieving, we can just simply say, it's so good to see you. The last thing a grieving person wants to hear is, how are you?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm teaching people who know someone's grieving to say, how's your grief today? Or
to acknowledge it, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Acknowledges it.
Yep.
Or if that word is uncomfortable to say, then it's an opportunity to say, how are you in this moment? Because when we say, how are you in this moment, the past is gone, the future is not here. We're here, heart to heart, eye to eye.
Yes.
Just like you and I greeted each other this morning.
Yep.
And so I feel that, yes, the holidays are to be merry and bright. But for those people that don't feel that way, let's not push it. Grief is really an inside job. So what grief is it's a call to go inside and really listen to ourselves. So I tell my clients, you're not broken by grief. You're broken open. Grief is a call to growth. And just like a seed is under the ground in the darkness, there's still that soil around it. And I know that every single one of us has loss. It may not be the death of someone. It may be a relationship that has come to an end. It may be a pet that died. It may be, you can't stay in this job any longer, even though you want to. It may be moving to be closer to your children. So all of those are losses, and it's a call for us to be kind and gentle and tender to one another. So just like the work you do calls for us to be kinder and gentler to others, when we're that, we can meet grieving people authentically.
I love it. And also to be brave and have those conversations, because I think a lot of people, including myself sometimes, we don't want to address, we're just like, I hope you're doing okay. But really just to own and say, I love how you just said, how are you in that moment?
Yes.
Because you're being real, you're connected, and you're not asking them to be like, how you doing? Because that's not going to be authentic.
No.
But we need to be brave and ask those questions that will really let people know that we're here.
Yes.
And also what I heard you say is that we have to be more present, because if we aren't, we're going to miss body language, you know, when you can even hear it over the phone, you know, when you ask someone how they're doing or what they're looking forward to. So I think just being more present and in the moment with people will help us be kinder and more connected to others.
It certainly is that. Yes.
Yes.
And it was interesting. I happened to see Ford versus Ferrari. And in that, at the very end of the movie, one of the characters is in deep grief. And a colleague says, it's been 6 months. And it's like grief is a disease. We don't want to have anything to do with it. So when we change the way we look at grief, grief can change. And grief can be that opportunity to really get to know ourselves, because ultimately, the question each of us must answer is, who am I now? Now that this relationship is over, now that I don't have this role in the workplace anymore. I'm retired.
Right. Yes, you're right, because there's so many chapters of life that can be defined as grief. And I think that's a great point, because a lot of people just think of grief as when someone has died. And so there's so many layers of it. Yes. Well, I love that. Well, that is definitely the cowbell idea, is for us to really slow down, be more present, and ask, you know, be brave to ask people how they truly are doing in this moment. I think will help everyone not only get through the holidays if we know it's hard for people, but this should be something that we do. I mean, every day someone is having some sort of grief, whether it's an anniversary of, you know, someone dying or their birthday, or just we need to be more aware and more sensitive that we honestly don't know what's going on in people's lives.
That's right.
Now, if people want to get in touch with you for some coaching on grief, because you are truly the expert at this, how can people get in touch with you?
They can go to my website, beyondyourloss.com, and there's a contact there. And so, and on that website, there is a great deal of information.
And your book.
And my book, yes.
Good. Well, thank you so much for making time. It's so important, the work that you do, because you change people's lives to help them get through some of these really, really difficult chapters. So thank you so much. And also, I love how festive you are.
Thank you.
You look lovely. Well, happy holidays. Thank you.
And happy holidays to you. Goodbye.